He says, all right, so you need to be very careful tonight when you're on guard. If you hear anything, you take action. Well, here I am, a new recruit in hostile territory, and the big shot tells me that they got 10 guys killed down the road, and I'm on guard duty. You can't see your hand in front of your face.
Mm-hmm.
It's so black, so dark. I'm standing out there, wide awake, scared, just scared to death. I was scared to death. And I hear something snap. Well, you're used to having discipline, and that's one of the main things in life that you need, even if you go into the military.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will learn it in the military the hard way.
Yeah. That's the way you don't want to learn it, I think.
No, you want to know it at home.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see what, like, especially now with the way the world is and the president that we have, I would not want to go in the military. I don't really want to go in the military anyway. But if it came down to it, I wouldn't be like a draft dodger or something.
No.
You know, I live in this country and it's my job to defend it. So be it.
Well, another perspective we could take is that God has put us in that position to be an influence. And if that's what, comes down to it, God's in control at the end of the day. And, we're there for a purpose. Maybe it might be to save souls,
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we're obedient, we don't really know why necessarily we're there, but God does have a purpose for us. And as long as we obey that purpose, he'll be glorified.
Yep.
Got a good perspective there. Military life is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Only if it's in a war and you're going to be involved in shooting at somebody or somebody shooting at you.
Mm-hmm.
And I pray that it never happens to either one of you guys. But you got to remember first, like, discipline. If you don't have discipline now,
yeah,
you will learn it. You will learn it not the easy way, the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned discipline very early in years.
Yeah. That reminds me of a story I was telling Joe earlier this morning about. So, Veterans Day is based off of the day that World War I ended, right? So it ended November 11th. So the 11th month on the 11th day at the 11th hour, that was when the armistice was signed and the shots stopped being fired. Well, the last American who was killed in World War I died at 10:59 a.m. on Armistice Day, 1 minute before the ceasefire went into effect. And the reason was because he didn't have the discipline necessary. He had done something stupid, like disobeyed his commanders or something, and so he got demoted. And so he decided that he had to prove himself, And so on the last day, right before everyone, stopped getting shot, he decided it would be a brilliant idea to disobey orders and go charge a road blockade armed with machine guns. And so he's charging this, the blockade on this road, and the Germans are trying to wave him back, like, go back. We don't want to shoot you. We're almost done here, like we don't have to do this. But eventually he got right on top of them. And so, they didn't want to get shot either. So they had to shoot him anyways. And so, it kind of goes with the whole theme of discipline. Is like, it's important, obviously.
I learned discipline very early in my life. I was about 7 or 8 years old. I think it's earlier than 7 or 8, maybe. Anyhow, it was a Sunday morning, and the Second World War was just about getting started. But anyhow, I went outside to get the newspaper, and I wanted to read the funnies. So I'm laying on my belly on the living room floor reading the funnies. And I hear my dad say, Chuck, brushed it off. And I kept looking at the funnies, and I heard Chuck again. And I kept looking at the funnies. I just didn't pay any attention. And the third time he said Chuck, and I hate to be nagged, I jumped up and went into the bedroom where he and my mom were. And as I went through the door, I saw an arm raise up with a extension cord wrapped around it. And back then, the beds were high. You could crawl under. If you wanted to hide from somebody, you could crawl under the bed. So I dove under the bed. My dad stepped on my legs. And he came down and down and down and down. And finally, my mom pulled him off. And after all of that, I got out. And my dad said to me, when I call you the first time, you come. I had no problem after that. When he asked me to come, I came.
Yep.
I never did. I still remember that.
Yeah.
So you don't lose that, but discipline. And I learned that morning that's the most important thing in life. It's your mom or your dad calls you, you're there, you're gone.
Yep.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Discipline. If you don't learn it at home.
Yeah. I mean, I think that people today are definitely not getting disciplined. It's now more of time out and go sit in a corner or something. And that's not beneficial to society at all. Because you're basically bringing up menaces that society has to deal with now. They should learn that there's consequences to my actions. And if I do something stupid, I'm going to have to pay for it. And, nobody's necessarily getting that anymore. It's more like, okay, you did something stupid, go stand in a corner. And that does absolutely nothing for them.
Yeah. You can go stand in the corner and plan your next mischief.
Well, standing in that corner does not bring pain.
Yeah.
Pain always registers. Pain always registers. And Mom knew how to do that too. She had a big wooden spoon. And sometimes she just used her hands, which were small but very accurate. And they found the spot that needed to be on.
Yep. We'll see. Yeah. I mean, honor thy father and thy mother. That's the Bible. And talking about discipline, I mean, that's the goal with honoring your father and your mother is, have discipline and be obedient and do what's right. Because if you don't,
there's a price.
There's consequences. Yeah.
There's a price to pay. Yes. In the military, you don't have any chance to rebel. If you choose to rebel, you will see the MPs coming to visit you.
Yeah.
But you don't want that either.
No, I don't. Yeah, that's not. Yeah,
no.
That's not.
No. And you learn to say, yes, sir. No, sir. You don't say, hey, bud, I get you. You don't say that.
Yeah.
You say, yes, sir. No, sir. That's it.
Yep. Well, it helps. Well, I mean, of course, it keeps discipline, but it helps show respect, too.
The other
person.
Yeah. You got to have respect. Respect for your parents, respect for the authorities over you.
Yep.
Yes, sir. Romans 13.
Powers that be are ordained of God.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. If he didn't want us to obey, he wouldn't put that in the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's because the Bible is 100% true all the time,
Well, yeah. I mean, if you disregard it, you face consequences. And it doesn't matter for what facility it is that does it, whether it's the Army or if it's the folks or if it's the police. It doesn't make any difference. You got
Yeah.
to have respect for the authority that's over you.
Yep. Yep. It's true. We're talking. Me and Joe have been talking about Veterans Day before you got here, obviously, and so we were just wanted to hear your experience in the army and how you got drafted, what it was like in Korea, and all those sorts of things. So let's start maybe with what you did before you got drafted, and then how you got drafted and where it went from there.
Well, before I was drafted, I right out of high school, I graduated high school on my birthday, and the following Monday, I went in and got hired at Ellis Chalmers, and I became a assembler. I assembled all kinds of parts for their machinery, and I worked there for a while. But I had to register for the draft. Registered for the draft, and before I registered for the draft, I was in Bible college, and when I came back home, then I went again to Alice Chalmers, and I registered once again. And then my dad got sick, and I had to write to the authorities that, well, I was no longer in Bible school, so I was eligible for the draft. And I got one of them famous letters that says, "Your friends and relatives and fellow compatriots have chosen you to serve in the U.S. military." So that's how that happened. Yeah, all my friends and relatives. With a war going on, I was supposed to be registered. Okay, so I was enlisted into the army at that point. From that point, then they put me on a bus. My pastor had gotten to the bus first, and he gave me a New Testament with some writing in it. And then we got on the bus, and they took us to Michigan. I was living in Indiana, but they took me to Michigan and um, uh, a facility there where the Army had just reopened that place, and the kitchens were full of grease and dust and dirt and filth and everything else. And they told us that we couldn't write home for a month. No communications for home. You're just going to do your work. So the first thing they did, they gave us uniforms. They just looked at you and they said, "Oh, well, this ought to fit." So they gave you what they thought would fit. Fortunately, mine did fit pretty good. But then we got into the barracks and they were filthy. Nobody had lived in there for years. And so they just opened it. So we had to clean out the barracks. So we got all the buckets and mops and everything and scrubbed the place down and got it ready. And then it was about midnight and they said, "Okay, you can go to bed." So we went to bed, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, they said the kitchen's in bad shape, and before the cooks can go to work, we need to clean up the kitchen. So we went into the kitchen, and they said, "Well, you got to protect your uniform, so get down to your skivvies." And so we got rid of laid our uniforms away. And in my position, I stood up on the cook stove and started scrubbing down that screen where all that fumes and everything goes up there, and the grease and the muck come down all over me. That was 3 o'clock in the morning, and by 6, they said, "All right, you can go to bed." Went to bed, and at 7:30, they said, "Up, everybody up, everybody up." So we got up. Well, we're going to have breakfast. We're going to have breakfast. Oh, so then we had breakfast, and that thing lasted till about 8 o'clock. And 8 o'clock, they said, "Okay, you can go take a rest now. Take a rest again." And then 10:30, they woke us up I said, outside, outside, everybody outside. Hit the doors and get outside. Okay, so we get out and just pushed the door open nice and walked out nice and got in ranks and the sergeant said, "Hey, what did I say? Did I say hit the door or just push the door? You ladies go back in there and you come out and I want to see that door pushed out." So we went back in and we all come out and crashed that door. He says, "No," he says, "you're doing things my way." All right. So then we got into calisthenics. Hardly any sleep at all. Coming from Indiana to Michigan, we were all bushed. All right, we're going on for calisthenics. Now, before then, if I could run a block, or jog a block, I'd be out of air. And so we started jogging, and we jogged, and we jogged, and jogged, and I couldn't get my breath. I always thought I was going to die. But then they called a halt, and so we got a couple breaths, and they said, "Okay, let's go again." I learned how to trot. I learned how to trot. Well, that was my first day in the military. Hardly any sleep at all. Finally, they let us sleep, go to bed. Well, we had supper, and then we went to bed. They let us sleep until 6 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, we got up for breakfast, straight out for calisthenics. I mean, all kind. 8-count push-ups, regular push-ups, squat jumps. I forget what else they called it. There was about 7 exercises, and we had a big black fella, sergeant, that was leading us in it. After that, we went on a 1-mile jog, and me not jogging, that almost killed me. Got back, and then they said, "All right, now you can have a little sit-down time." About an hour later, they called us again. I mean, this is all a part of the discipline. So that was our first real day in the military.
Jumping in the deep end, it sounds like.
Oh, well, I mean, you had no choice. They said, "Do it," and you did it.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. Well, I mean, and, just the fact of the matter is, I mean, once you got over to the actual, battlefield, that's the way it was. Because if you didn't jump when they said jump, then you might get jumped.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Yeah. The physical training was good. When I went in, I weighed 135 pounds, just a skinny mite. And 6 months later, I was 185.
Probably a lot of it was muscle, I would guess.
Oh, yeah. Well, when we were standing in line, first inducted, we standing in line, and the sergeant come up to the guy standing next to me, big, beefy, big belly guy. And I'm standing next to him, 135 pounds. So he walks up to that big guy and grabs him in the gut. He says, "I'm going to take this from you." And he hit me in the belly. He says, "I'm going to put it on you." 185 pounds. I wound up. Yeah.
So, okay. So that was your first day. So I know eventually you ended up on a boat heading towards Japan and then Korea. I think it was. So what was that like?
Well, I never was on a big boat. Always smaller boats. And this was a 3-stacker. And we had guys that were going to let off in Alaska, too. So there was 8,000 of us on the boat. And wouldn't you know it, one of the staples that they gave us to eat was green apples. Can you imagine what happens when you eat green apples? The latrines were in the front of the boat and the back of the boat, and the boat was 3 football lengths long. And if you eat green apples, your stomach begins to growl and roll, and everything gets kind of upset. And the first thing you want to do is run to the latrine. And that was a big mess because some guys couldn't quite make it. And the stairwells and the platforms that you had to go down, and the restrooms were not only in the front and the back, but they were down in the bottom of the boat. And so that was a real experience. It took 2 days to get everybody situated
Yeah.
back to being normal.
Mhm.
And one day, and we're traveling towards Japan, and all of a sudden there come a typhoon. I mean, big waves. Now this boat is very big and it's very heavy. It's got all kinds of equipment on it, and I like to be out on the deck. I love being out on the deck. And one time you're looking, and the waves start coming. We went on the outside of the typhoon, but still there was a lot of effect. When you looked over the side, and way down there somewhere is where the water is, and you're up on a wave. The next thing, you're way down, and the water is way up over you. So finally, they said, "Get off of the deck and get into covered decks." Okay, so that's what we had to do. But traveling on the ocean mostly was calm. Pacific Ocean is mostly calm unless you get a big storm that comes up. And so that was that. There was 3 friends of mine that I trained with that were with me on the boat. And we had, on the 3 stackers, in between the stacks, we would stand and we would have devotions. We'd have a small Bible study, and we'd have prayer, and we enjoyed ourselves that way, spiritually. And we'd meet every day between the stacks. So that was a good time on the boat. So that's basically it. It took 8 days to get to Alaska, and then it took another 4 days to get to Japan. So we had I enjoyed the boat ride.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was a good boat ride, a safe boat ride.
Yeah. Because, I mean, every now and then I hear stories of other people who, they get sick the whole time and they can't keep anything down and stuff. But it's good that you did, because that would be miserable.
I always made it to where I had to go after eating them green apples.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've never had that experience with green apples, but I've had some experience with camp food. That'll do it to you too.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Huh. Camp food. No, I've never had trouble with camp food.
Yeah.
Because I haven't spent a whole lot of time at camp, but we were working on a camp, Bible church camp deal, and we always had good food. No problems.
That's good. Yeah. So, okay, so you got to Japan, and then eventually you went over to Korea. So, what was Korea like when you got there?
I'll tell you what, the company that I got involved with was the last company that got on the last big hill fight. And it was all over the papers. And the sergeant says, "Where were you when we were fighting?" I said, "I was on the water. I was coming this way. I can't help that I wasn't there." Or he said, "You know what?" He says, 200 men from this company went up on that hill. 9 of us came back. I said, "What?" Yes, he said 9 of us came back. He said that was the biggest fight that anybody has seen in this Korean War. Where were you? And boy, he was on my back right from the start. And he said, they handed me a new rifle. He says, I want your rifle. You take mine, I'll take yours. I said, well, all right, because he's a sergeant. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just a private. I mean, I don't know nothing about Army life except with my training. And then there was a whistle blown, and the sergeant says, all right, we got to get out for inspection, and we got to pick out our guards for the night. Okay. So we went out. But before I went out, I ran a rod through the rifle to make sure that it was clean because the company commander inspects them. So we get out there, and I'm standing there, and he comes up in front of me and he says, Soldier, give me your rifle. Well, he took it. He held it up to the sun and he said, did you clean this rifle? I said, yes, sir, I did. Just before I walked out, I rammed the rod back through it and it looked great. He says, look at this. And there's all like 1,000 spiders had been up in there making webs. It was a terrible sight. He said, you cleaned this rifle? I said, yes, sir, I did. I did. I put it. Finally, my sergeant walks up and he says, sir, I gave him my rifle that I burned up on the hill. He said, oh, okay. Well, where's his? He says, I've got it. Okay, so I got through that. Then he gets on there and he says, now, men, we are looking for a problem that we had 10 miles up the road. And what was that? I said to myself, what was that? And he said, well, there's 10 men in there asleep at night in their tent, and the gooks came down, killed all of them, and burned their tent down and disappeared. 10 miles up the road. He says, all right, so you need to be very careful tonight when you're on guard. If you hear anything, you take action. Well, here I am, a new recruit in hostile territory, and the big shot tells me that they got 10 guys killed down the road, and here I'm on guard duty. You can't see your hand in front of your face. It's so black, so dark. I'm standing out there, wide awake, scared, just scared to death. I was scared to death. And I hear something snap. And pop, I pulled the trigger, not the trigger back, but the bolt back and inserted around. Halt to be recognized, or advance to be recognized. And I hear some snapping going around, some dried grass and twigs and stuff. And he says, I'm your company commander, and I'm come to check on you. I said, oh, sir. Okay, sir. He says, I see you're awake. I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir, I'm awake. He said, all right, stand your ground. And he walked off, and he was going to check the rest of the guards. Man, my mouth was in my stomach or something, you know. I mean, I felt real bad, but that was a scary experience. Let me tell you that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So, do you have any other stories then from your experience in Korea then?
Other stories of experience in Korea. Oh. Well, yeah. They saw on my records that I could type 20 words a minute. That's nothing. But they decided that their secretary was going to move. Now, it wasn't a female; it was a man. was going to register to regimental headquarters, and they needed another guy. I said, "No, sir, I can't type enough, and I don't think I'd fit the bill." He says, "Well, it says 20 words a minute here." I said, "Yes, sir. That was in high school, and I'm not in high school anymore, and I haven't touched a typewriter since." So I talked my way out of that one. Wasn't long after that, a guy comes in my tent and he says, "Litke?" I said, "Yeah." He said, they want to see you up at regimental headquarters. I said, "What for?" "Well, you've got some typing on your thing here, and you refused it here at the company, but they need a guy bad up there." So I said, "All right." So they drove me up there. And what did they do? They had me filing. Nothing to do with a typewriter, but filing.
Mhm.
Dull, oh, crazy work. So I did that for about a week. And it was starting to snow. And it was cold. Korea gets cold like it does in Michigan. It gets down to 30 below at times, and sometimes it's only 20. That's a heat wave. And they had me there in the headquarters. Well, first, before that, they I'm sleeping. This is Sunday morning, and I'm going to get up to go to church. In the meantime, so I'm sleeping, and somebody grabs my shoulder and shakes me in bed. "You Litke?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, come on, you got to get up. We got to get to headquarters." "What? This is Sunday, and nobody works on Sunday." "We do at headquarters. Get up." So I got up and went to headquarters. And so all this, and then every day after that, they did the same thing for that week. Finally, I'm standing by the door of the Quonset hut where headquarters is, and I'm waiting for the commander to come in. And he steps in the door, and it's snowing blue blazes out there. It's just coming down like a blizzard. He walks in. He said, "Boy, it's cold out there, and it's snowing like crazy out there. You can hardly see where you're going." I said, "Yes, sir. I know that, but I want back in the company." "You want back in the company? Look out there." I said, "Yes, sir. I know it's snowing, and it's very cold out there, but I want back in the company." He says, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "All right. You go back to the company and you live with that miserable weather out there." I said, "Yes, sir. I'm going. I'm heading out." So they took me back to the company. That's one interesting thing
Mhm.
because, you know, sitting in a nice Quonset hut, warm, in your tent, you had a you had a stove in the front and a stove in the back, and the pipe that let the smoke out ran up right next to the ridge pole. And so, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in that.
Mhm.
And guys would get drunk and they'd come in and they'd think they're grabbing for the ridge pole, and they grab that red
Oh
hat,
no. Mhm.
that red hot pipe. They'd wake up real quick.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But that's just little side
Mhm.
incidents that
Mhm.
happen that
Yeah.
come to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once in a while, we'd get an alert. Some of their gook planes would fly overhead, and that would just stir everybody up.
Yeah.
And so all right, take all your bags and whatnot, put it over there in the storage room. We're getting on trucks, and we're grab your weapons, and we're going. And we're going where? We're going to assemble and face the enemy. They're trying to come over here, or they at least send a plane over. So that we go there and we'd stay there for a day. And on alert, ready for the gook to come. I don't like people shooting at me, so I'm a little on edge. But that's about the scariest stuff
Mhm.
that I had witnessed. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Because you got in, you were there like right after
I was
they
I
were
was
done, sort of, right?
I was 8 days on the water, heading towards Korea. The war was still on,
Mm-hmm.
but 8 days out, they signed the armistice. That boat was just rocking. Everybody was so happy and thinking we're never going to face anything bad over there. Well, them 10 guys didn't expect anything to happen either, and they
Mhm.
were gone.
Yeah.
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 Yes, sir. Experience in life in the military. In the United States, it wasn't bad, but you get over there in Korea where not only the weather's against you, but you're always looking for something to
Mm-hmm.
happen.
Yeah. It's a whole nother
It's a whole
world over there.
That's right. It's a whole nother experience being on war torn property and planes flying all the time, and you wonder how long this is going to last.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Welcome to the world that we live in, I guess.
And
Yeah.
it's not much different now.
No, no. In fact, it seems like we're heading more that direction all over again.
That's right. And there's 3 different spots in the world where it's all going on.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm just hoping that nothing goes berserk here where they're going to be starting calling up 21-year-olds again.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah,
But, it'll be what it'll be. I live in this country, so.
that's right. Well, you got to fight for your country if you're gonna have a country.
Right.
So yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's my prayer. You young guys never have to face what we have faced in the past,
Yeah.
and on so many different fronts.
Yeah, a lot of different places.
Well, challenging the Chinese
Mm-hmm.
over there with that little island
Mm-hmm.
over there,
Taiwan.
Taiwan,
Yeah.
and we're challenging the Ukraine. That can spread.
Yep.
And there's other places where in
Yeah.
Syria where
Mhm.
we're bombing their supply dumps and whatnot over there.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're just looking for trouble.
Well, I mean, right now, our leadership is not very good at, you know,
Yeah,
toning things down or ramping them up high enough that things,
yeah.
steady out, it seems like. But here we are.
Well, that's where we are, and that's where this next election is gonna be a big turning point for our country.
Yeah.
And you it's hard for people to register. Really, is Trump really guilty of all this stuff, or is it just something that they trumped up to get him so that he's in a position where he can't run?
Yeah. Who knows?
And there's all kinds of thought that way.
Yeah.
Some are definitely for Trump, thinking that he's being persecuted. And there's other people that think, hey, look at that. His numbers are going up every time they accuse him of something
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Yeah.
people are mixed up,
Yep.
and it's crazy. And a lot of it, his numbers are so high. You wonder, well, how in the world, if he is this bad,
Yeah. How did he get that?
how did he get that high up?
Yeah.
Aren't people thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And if he is guilty of that, put him in jail.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think that's probably one of those things we'll just have to.
Oh, that's the problem. People don't think.
Yeah. Especially our generation seems like doesn't think. They're like, oh, let's go scroll our phones for a while. It'll be great.
Mhm.
And then they wake up one day and, they're going to wake up and there'll probably be a war and realize that life isn't all honky dory and easy,
That's right.
you know?
That's right.
And I'd rather it not have to be that way, but that might end up being the way that it is. At any
Yep.
rate.
And then
I
somebody's got to
mean,
pay
I
the
think
price.
in a way it would be beneficial. But I definitely wouldn't want that to happen. But I think it would be beneficial um, to bring people back to reality. It's like, hey, we live in a sin cursed world. Let's wake up and let's get our act together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to come to that, but in the end, that might be what saves us.
And the thing of it is it's affecting so many areas of our life. This discontent and this bickering and this fighting and all of that. It's going to just end up in a big catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening for the trumpet of the Lord saying, "Come up hither."
Yep.
I'm 91 years old. I'm I'm content with my life right now. I'm content. But some my kids are telling me, "Well, you're going to live to 100." No, I don't. I don't want that. That's 9 more years of this misery that's going on. I don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't want it. But
I don't blame you.
if they're thinking 9 more years, it's 9 more years for them too.
Yeah.
And Lord only knows which way it's going. We have in our Sunday school class where we went through Revelation and restudying it, and I mean all the signs are there for the trumpet to call any second.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is ready for that.
Yeah.
And especially now with this war in Israel. I mean, you know, how long can the Lord wait to
Yeah.
bring revelation to fruition?
Yeah.
Yeah, all the signs are there.
Yep.
And the next thing is just the trumpet.
Mm-hmm. And we won't have to worry about it anymore.
That's right. We won't be here to worry about it, but the people that are left behind,
Yeah.
it's going to be cataclysmic.
Yep. That's why they call it sort of like the apocalypse, Everything's going to fall apart, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. Well, the wrong person's going to be in charge.
That's, yes.
You think the wrong person's in charge right now, just wait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. So, Joe, I was just curious. Do you have any random questions that you thought of while we've been going through this? Because I've been doing a lot of talking.
So, what was the? Yeah. So, what was the? I guess the attitude of the American people back then, as far as the war going on.
Oh, in Korea?
Yeah, from your perspective.
Well, I think it was favorable. It wasn't like it was in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the oppression that was going on there and the wanting to take over the whole Korea from north and south. I think the American people understood that better than they understood Vietnam, and I believe that it was reflected in it. Though it's not a settled situation,
Mm-hmm.
it's not an end of war.
Right.
It's still, what do you call it?
It's still technically going because there's no treaty or anything signed. I
Yeah,
know that.
there was no real end to it. So I think that could blow back up again,
Yeah, it's possible.
because the North is all upset because the South is having maneuvers with Americans, and that they could get so perturbed that they want to start that all over again and try to get the rest of the country
Yeah.
together on their side. And but American people, I think they understood why we went over there and what was at stake.
Yeah. I wish that's something they would have remembered and would have kept remembering, in the
Yeah.
future. Because obviously, I mean, that went out the window, it seemed like during Vietnam, from what I understand anyway. And then the more we got into, it seemed like the more people forgot
We're against it.
why we were doing it. And then it also seems to me, thinking about wars like Iraq and Afghanistan, is that the government didn't let the military do what they needed to do. The sort of like, okay, so in Vietnam, their rules of engagement were basically to the point that you couldn't actually do anything about anything. Like you weren't allowed to shoot unless you saw them, the enemy, and they were actively shooting at you.
Mhm.
So, like, even if you're getting shot at, if you can't see them, you can't shoot back.
Mm.
And like in the air, they had rules where so they had missiles on these planes that could be seen easily because of the big smoke trails they would leave.
Mhm.
And the missiles were supposed to be you were supposed to be able to fire them before you even saw the enemy coming. But you weren't allowed to fire the missiles until you actually saw the enemy. And by then it was too late because they didn't have any weaponry to be in a dogfight like they did in World War II and those sorts
Mm.
of eras. And so the rules of engagement were, made the American army almost like they couldn't fight. The point was to go over there and fight and win the war, but they weren't allowed to win the war.
Mhm.
And then when we get to wars like Afghanistan and Iraq, terrorists, I can understand the idea that you want to save as many civilian lives as possible and those sorts of things because terrorists are horrible and they use civilians as
As
human shields.
shields,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, you can see that even today with Hamas. But um at the same time, if the goal is to go in and free people from terrorists, then you're going to have to fight the terrorists
Mhm.
and people are going to die. That's just the way that it is. Unfortunately, because that's war. And
Yeah.
it's not pretty and it's not fun. It's ugly and terrible, but that's the way that it is.
Yeah.
And I think that the American people and the American government needs to let the military do what the military does best, and that's fight wars and win them. Because
Yeah.
what's the point of fighting a war if you're not going to win it?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And Vietnam is the classic remembrance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Seemed like nobody was in in charge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the worst.
Yeah. Nixon didn't have a whole lot of pull on that. Well,
Yep.
what else? You got any other observations or thoughts or whatever?
Well, did you get in any conflict or anything like that?
Oh, in Korea, yeah. Well, we all were upends and uptight about Korea.
Hmm.
Uh, war could have started all over again just a few days after I arrived because they didn't. I mean, all they did was sign a truce. The truce don't mean anything unless it's backed up and it's held in place. And that so far it is, but it's looking scarier every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's looking scarier every day, and nobody wants that to come up again. And
Hmm.
that's certainly not me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't I don't want that to happen. But I'm out of it
Hmm.
now. I'm out of it. All I can do is pray for the guys that are in the military now, and trust that all these skirmishes are going to be laid aside and not expand beyond the borders right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. War is a terrible thing, and it's not God's idea.
Nope.
We know whose idea it is, don't we?
hmm Well, the devil likes division, you know?
Oh, divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, you can see it in our country just on like the political and cultural front, but I mean, you can see it in wars too.
Yeah.
Throughout all of history, people have always been fighting each other.
And the worst part about the whole situation for all of civilization, or even here in the United States, in England, we know that the churches are folding one right after another, and then it's happening here too.
Mm-hmm.
Churches are changing their philosophy of how they operate, um, and it's hard to find a good church that is preaching not only the gospel but is working the gospel. And churches are getting smaller and smaller. My son Steve is involved in a church now where they can't get a quorum because there's three families that have been in the deaconship for 30 years and they are against what the pastor is doing. And that throws off, when you have a business meeting, it throws off the quorum
Mm-hmm.
and you can't have a vote on anything because you don't have a quorum.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's what he's living with right now
Mm-hmm.
as a newly elected deacon.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't move forward because they got too many no votes,
Yeah.
or people just don't show up enough
To actually
to
have a vote in the first
actually
place.
have a vote.
Yeah.
They probably could because Steve says that the church has accepted into membership more people in the last 8 months than what the church has to start with.
Mm-hmm.
But they still can't get a quorum because those people that have been there for 30 years
Mm-hmm.
don't want to have a change. Like the building,
Mm-hmm.
they want to have more classrooms so they can have Sunday school, have more people, more classes broken up,
Mm-hmm.
and they got enough building there to, if they put walls up in certain places, they could have enough classrooms.
Yeah.
But nobody will vote on anything because
They're all
they're
divided up.
satisfied with what they got.
Yeah. See, that's something me and Joe have talked about, not on this podcast, but on a different show that we're doing. Is that we were talking about unity and how Christians need to be unified and how, why do we bicker over things like the color of the carpet and putting up, walls for Sunday school rooms when, like, how is that helping anybody? You know what I mean?
It's
It's
not.
not helping
It's
anybody.
not.
And it brings another thought to my mind is like, just because we ain't never done it that way before doesn't mean we should do it that way now. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I mean, because coming from a younger person looking at that, it's like, well, isn't the goal to be able to help more people and, be able to minister better? And yet, because we've never done that, we're not going to do it? Like, is that your reason? Come
Mhm.
on. You know? That's why we started the podcast. It's like, well, no one else was going to start a podcast, so we decided we were going to start a podcast. It's not. We need to quit being like, well, we have our little box, and if we do anything outside of the little box, then that's terrible. Well, forget the box. There's other places and other realms where
Mhm.
there's a need, and we need to go fill it.
Yeah. Well, like I said before, the military's not a bad place if you're disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
And it can get to be a very bad place if you're undisciplined. And I used to have, well, they bring guys in from the jail
Mm-hmm.
Out of they serve their time and they bring them in. Well, I knew because I had uh, um, divinity
Mm-hmm.
on the bottom of my paperwork, which really screwed up the guy that was going to send me to Korea or keep me here. But anyhow, he misused my name and misused a lot of other stuff while we were talking. And but anyhow, what happened is now what was I going to say? It was there and it was gone.
Well, you were talking about the people they would bring from the jail
Oh yeah,
back.
okay. I knew that the sergeant would gonna come out of the company office and holler down the street, Litke, Litke, because I was supposed to bring about reform
No,
on
no.
these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew.
Mhm.
And so, sure enough, that's every time they brought in a guy that come out of the jail, and they'd bring him into my thing because I'm supposed to reform them.
Mhm.
Well, I did in most cases. I taught them how to shine shoes. I taught them how to clean their belts. Taught them all this stuff. See, these are undisciplined guys. They
Mhm.
come in and they wanted to have their own way, and they
Yeah.
did all they wanted to do. And so it was up to me to straighten them up. I had a list of guys' names, and when you get out in ranks in the morning, they're looking for people to do odd jobs here and there. Well, when they say that, I look up on that list, or I knew on that list who the next guy is supposed to go.
Mhm.
Nobody else is supposed to go, just that guy.
Mhm.
And so they all knew they had their turn,
Yeah.
and nobody has to go twice in a row. And so that helped
Mhm.
because when the guys began to see that I was being fair
Yeah.
with them, things
Yeah.
began to
Things. Yeah. Yeah.
change. And there was little odd things that I did that kind of changed their attitudes towards not only towards me but towards the military establishment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's always little things that you can do,
Mhm.
but that was back on subject. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no,
that's
that was
neither here
good.
nor
That's good.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what I was gonna ask is, so we've talked about your experience in Korea, and we've talked a little bit about Veterans Day and some of the other experiences that you've had, and about unity. We talked about a lot of stuff, but to bring it back, my question is, well, I have two questions, but the first one is, why do you think it's important for Americans to remember Veterans Day?
Because of the price it cost. There's a lot of people that gave their lives for what?
Yeah.
For what? And you got to have a perspective on what this country was established for. Was not only for religious freedom, but a place to live in peace with those around you. Now, how can you do that the way we're established with our laws and stuff, and some of them not very good anymore
Mm-hmm.
for the circumstances we are in. So I tell you, it's we're in a muddled situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Yep.
Yeah. And what's that second question? What's the other
Although
question
the
you
other
have?
question was, so, our podcast is called Young America. So I was wondering if it's probably a similar answer, but why do you think it's important for young people specifically to remember days like Veterans Day and, sort of have that respect for the military and veterans and that sort of thing?
Oh, well, it's always important for everybody. It's not just young people. Young people today are living in America in a safe environment, and they don't look for going to another place
Mm-hmm.
to help. They're satisfied with life as it is, and though there are so many things that they can be involved in, uh, that they choose to be involved in things that don't count.
Hmm.
A lot of them. Now, I won't say everyone, but a lot of them are choose to be on uh, involved in board games, not board games, but this
Yeah, the video games and stuff.
video games and stuff. They're hiding behind the video games, and they just are not interested in what's going on around about them.
Hmm.
And that's a sad situation for young people to be in, but that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And it's for an older person to looking at that, it makes me mad.
Yeah.
It makes me mad. They're not serious. They're not thinking about what's going on around them.
Hmm.
And should they ever try to be called up, like I was,
Hmm.
that would be they'd be running.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
They'd be going to Canada or going some other place.
They'd probably have to go to Mexico.
Yeah.
'Cause Canada, at this point, Canada might ship them back, but I don't know. Actually, I don't even know if that'd be true at the rate Canada is going. But anyways, that's beside the point.
Yeah. Well, would you agree that this whole world is messed up?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
It's
not
what
just
happens when sin enters into the
it's,
world, though.
it's yes. Well, that's Satan's attitude. His target is to get things so mixed up all over the
Mhm.
world that nobody loves anybody anymore.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yep.
I mean, we don't take into well, you look at the people that are being hurt right now because the Israelites are going in after these Hamas, and innocent people are getting killed. What's your attitude about that? I mean, that's unnecessary. But it happens because the superstructure, the buildings, and all that stuff has more than just Hamas in it. It's got
Hmm.
innocent people in it.
And they did that on purpose too,
Yeah,
because they knew we didn't. They
yeah,
know we don't want to kill civilians,
yeah.
and they play off of it.
Well, they do human shields, and it's crazy. But that's the mindset.
Yeah.
That's the mindset, and I don't agree with it, but that's what we're living with.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
It's been fun. Thanks for coming.
okay.
I think we summed it all up. Did we, Joe?
Yeah,
Okay. Cool.
yeah, I think so. Just one more thing. We just want to thank all the veterans that have served and that are serving. Um, so it takes a lot of guts to do what you do, and
Yep.
we're thankful for it.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
And I was glad to serve.
Yep. Thank you for what you've done for us.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's over. Glad it's over, and I pray that it's not going to happen to any of you guys.